Hello, Squirrel Squad listeners. I figure we got just enough time for me to finish up chapter 12. I don't think there's very much more. I should have pushed myself and finished yesterday, but I hate to try to... It's torturous reading and getting it wrong when the lines start doing this with that astigmatism I have. So, back on chapter 12. Very good, Polly. You're getting on fast, whispered Tom, patting his yellow kids approvingly. Kid gloves. Be quiet. Dear me, how warm it is. And Polly gave him a frown that delighted his soul. Come out and have an ice. We shall have time. Fan is so absorbed I couldn't think of disturbing her, said Polly, fancying that her friend was enjoying the evening as much as she was. A great mistake, by the way, for Fan was acting for effect, and though she longed to turn and join them, wouldn't do it unless a certain person showed signs of missing her. He didn't, and Fanny chatted on, raging inwardly over her disappointment and wondering how Polly could be so gay and selfish. It was delicious to see the little airs Polly put on, for she felt as if she were somebody else and acting a part. She leaned back, as if quite oppressed by the heat, permitted Sidney to fan her, and paid him for the service by giving him a flower from her bouquet, proceedings which amused Tom immensely, even while it piqued him a little to be treated like an old friend who didn't count. Go in and win, Polly. I'll give you my blessing, he whispered as the curtain rose again. It's only part of the fun, so don't you laugh, you disrespectful boy, she whispered back in a tone never used toward Sidney. Tom didn't quite like the different way in which she treated them, and the word boy disturbed his dignity, for he was almost 21, and Polly ought to treat him with more respect. Sidney at the same moment was wishing he was in Tom's place, young, comely, and such a familiar friend that Polly would scold and lecture him in the delightful way she did Tom, while Polly forgot them both when the music began and left them ample time to look at her and think about themselves. While they waited to get out when all was over, Polly heard Fan whisper to Tom, "What do you think Trix will say to this?" "What do you mean?" "Why, the way you've been going on tonight." "Don't know, don't care. It's only Polly." "That's the very thing. She can't bear pee." "Well, I can, and I don't see why I shouldn't enjoy myself as well as Trix." "You'll get to enjoying yourself too much if you aren't careful. Polly's waked up." "I'm glad of it, and so's Sid. I only spoke for your good. Don't trouble yourself about me. I'll get lecturing enough in another quarter and can't stand any more. Come, Polly." She took the arm he offered her, but her heart was sore and angry, for that phrase, "It's only Polly," hurt her sadly, as if it wasn't anybody, hadn't any feelings, and was only made to amuse or work for people. Fan and Tom are both mistaken, and I'll show them that Polly is awake, she thought indignantly. Why shouldn't I enjoy myself as well as the rest? Besides, it's only Tom, she added with a bitter smile as she thought of Trix. "Are you tired, Polly?" asked Tom, bending down to look into her face. "Yes, of being nobody." "Ah, but you ain't nobody. You're Polly, and you couldn't better that if you tried ever so hard," said Tom warmly, for he really was fond of Polly, and felt uncommonly so just then. "I'm glad you think so anyway. It's so pleasant to be liked." And she looked up with her face quite bright again. "I always did like you, don't you know, ever since that first visit. But you teased me shamefully for all that." "So I did, but I don't now." Polly didn't answer, and Tom said with more anxiety than the occasion required, "Do I, Polly?" "Not the same way," she answered in a tone that didn't sound quite natural. "Well, I never will again." "Yes, you will. You can't help it." And Polly's eye glanced at Sidney, who was in front of Fan. Tom laughed and drew Polly closer as the crowd pressed, saying with mock tenderness, "Didn't she like to be chaffed about her sweethearts? Well, she shan't be if I can help it. Poor dear, did she get her little bonnet knocked into a cocked hat and her little temper rifled at the same time?" Polly couldn't help laughing, and in spite of the crush, enjoyed the slow journey from seat to carriage, for Tom took such excellent care of her. She was rather sorry when it was over. They had a merry little supper after they got home, and Polly gave them a burlesque opera that convulsed her hearers. For her spirits rose again, and she was determined to get the last drop of fun before she went back to her humdrum life again. "I've had a regularly splendid time, and thank you ever so much," she said when the good nights were being exchanged. "So have I. Let's go and do it again tomorrow," said Tom, holding the hand from which he had helped to pull a refractory glove. "Not for a long while, please. Too much pleasure would soon spoil me," answered Polly, shaking her hand. "I don't believe it. Good night, sweet Mistress Milton, as Sid called you. Sleep like an angel, and don't dream of—" I forgot. No teasing allowed. And Tom took himself off with theatrical farewell. "Now it's all over and done with," thought Polly as she fell asleep after a long vigil, but it was not. And Polly's fun cost more than the price of gloves and bonnet. For having nibbled at forbidden fruit, she had to pay the penalty. She only meant to have a good time, and there was no harm in that, but unfortunately she yielded to the various small temptations that beset pretty young girls, and did more mischief to others than to herself. Fanny's friendship grew cooler after that night. Tom kept wishing Trix was half as satisfactory as Polly, and Mr. Sidney began to build castles that had no foundation. That's it. Sorry, it was only a little bit over 7.5 minutes, but like I say, I need a little bit of a break. And then Miss Karen's coming on, a yarn addict. And chapter 13 is called The Sunny Side. So we'll hopefully get to that tomorrow. I'll be sweet, don't be ugly, and hope to see you over at Miss Karen's, the yarn addict with Karen. Love y'all. Bye-bye.